Roll Tide, everybody. We're back on a Monday, and we appreciate all of you guys for hanging out with us here on Cover Crimson. We're going to talk about one of Alabama's recruits, offensive lineman, that is going to be deciding sometime soon, and break down what a guy named Bear could mean to Alabama football. That we'll talk about the basketball game. Hey, don't cry. It's one game. We're going to be all right. Yeah, we might have lost the game of the century, part one, but we got him again. We might play him again. Might play him 4 times. Yep. That and more right here on Cover Crimson. Let's get it started. All right, everybody. That is Clint Lamb. I'm Mick Gillispie. We appreciate all you guys for hanging out. Get in that comment section. Let's talk some Alabama football today. And good to see you, Clint. Let's get right into it before we exchange pleasantries and talk basketball. Let's get right into recruiting because we're getting into that season now where Alabama's going to start adding players to a class that has one guy in it. And you and me were talking, and you're like, hey, there's a guy named Bear that could be hibernating over in Georgia, and we might be pulling him. Tell us about Bear McWhorter.
I really like this guy, Mick. He grew up an Alabama fan, lifelong Alabama fan. He was actually named after Bear Bryant, so that's a great start. So you talk about, he's a Georgia guy, living in Georgia, but he grew up an Alabama fan. Alabama's in really good shape with him. He's committing on February 28th, the last day of this month. The finalists are like Alabama, Clemson, Florida, Michigan, and South Carolina. But a lot of people believe it's kind of down to either Alabama or Michigan, which, for offensive line play, both are pretty, good schools for an offensive lineman to go. But just watching him, like you see, he's a 3-star. He's ranked outside the top 500 prospects. He is, I think the number 49 interior offensive lineman according to On3 or the On3 industry rankings. You always end up seeing these types of guys who end up being ranked a little bit lower than you would, want or expect watching his tape. And so maybe as I'm, getting more familiar with the 2026 class, I've been going through and watching film. I knew this was a guy that Alabama was really interested in. I knew I wanted to get around to watching him fairly quickly. He's, kind of been one of the first offensive linemen that I've kind of went and viewed, but he's not the first. I've watched other guys as well, and I'm sure we'll talk at some point in the future about those guys. But turning the tape on for Bear, I'm like, why is this guy not rated higher? And we say this about every class. There's always a couple of guys who you feel like probably should have been ranked higher. Lightseer Brooks is kind of definitely one of those guys for the 2025 class, but for 2026, when you watch him, just a very scrappy, competitive offensive lineman. He's got a nasty demeanor, always looking for action, always looking to punish somebody, always looking to find somebody and bury him. But when you watch from like a technical standpoint, pretty technically savvy for a guy's age, and he plays left tackle and left guard for Cass. Only 6'3", about I think 305, 306 pounds. So he's projected to be an interior offensive lineman exclusively on the next level. Makes sense. I love how he projects in there because he understands leverage. He understands angles. Like he's able to effectively wall off defenders. He's kind of a guy that he jars defenders on contact. Very physical player. Loves to get after people. Loves working up to the second level and punishing those linebackers and safeties and everybody else. And so just watching him, this guy was committed to Arkansas at one point in time. Now they're not a finalist for him. But you look at the schools who are, and it's like, makes sense. He's being pursued by a lot of different schools, and I think Alabama's in really good shape for him. So I wanted to talk about him a little bit, just get my thoughts, because you don't see too many of these guys. Like when I think of 3-star offensive linemen, like Anthony Steen's a perfect example. Chance Warmack, to an extent, is a perfect example where coming out of high school, they're a 3-star player, but you understand that to an extent. Like Chance Warmack far exceeded being a 3-star. Anthony Steen, for the most part, far exceeded really playing for Alabama, being a 3-star. But the athletic limitations that you saw with those guys, the limited upside from a guy like Anthony Steen, that made more sense to me. You watch a guy like Bear McWhorter, who's got that physicality. He's extremely strong, extremely powerful, but then he also has some complementary athleticism, playing left tackle and left guard, and he does all these things well. He's one of those players that I have a hard time wondering why he's rated so low for some places, and I almost guarantee at some point, and probably some point soon, he's going to start climbing.
Yeah, well, you and I both worked at On3 at one point, or with On3, and they've got him as a 3-star. 24/7 has him as a 3-star. The crazy thing is that Rivals has him as the number 11 interior offensive lineman and the number 35 player in Georgia, right? And then ESPN has him as a 4-star now too, and they've got him as the number 5 interior lineman. So both of those services, which we normally look at On3, I think just because we work there and we know those guys and they're great. But you're right. I mean, I kind of see what you're saying now with where you're at with this guy, and I bet you that the industry catches up because they'll re-rank all of these guys too.
Michael Carroll last year was a guy who was a 3-star player, and I mean, he finishes a 5-star. So you're 100% right.
Yeah. So, but pretty cool, man. I'm excited about it. I mean, I feel bad that we've got Zion Gibson as our only guy right now. He's all alone on that list for 26. He needs some friends, and having a Bear on there with him would be pretty good, right?
I mean, absolutely. And I mean, you watch how some of these guys are like progressing. Like, we've heard good things about Rock Montgomery. We know the coaching staff really likes him. He was kind of a lower rated guy, but what you more so want to look at is who's going after him and who all wants him. And for Bear McWhorter, like, every major program for the most part wants this guy for a reason. And that's kind of the first, sign. I have no doubt that he's going to climb in the rankings. I don't know how much. I think he's closer to being the 11th best interior offensive lineman. I don't know. I would need to watch other guys, and that's what I'm going to do. I'm in that process right now. Like, I don't want to say, oh, he should be a top 5 interior offensive lineman if I haven't watched at least 5 other interior offensive linemen to kind of gauge and know. But what I will say is, based off of previous rankings in years past and kind of a talent level versus what I saw with some other guys, I think one of the things with Michael Carroll that really helped him climb as high as he did is he has a lot of these same traits. But he's a 6'6" guy. We've got some tackle guard versatility. Like, he might end up starting off at right tackle for Alabama, projects more so inside long term. But, the fact that Bear is 6'3", so he's not overly long. I don't think he's quite as athletic, even though I do think he's a much better athlete than a 3-star would typically. Like I said, and it's either like the Ryan Kellys, who were severely undersized, but are athletic coming out of high school, or it's the guys like Anthony Steen that's a 3-star, very powerful, technically savvy type of player, but there's limited upside as far as where they can be. So the projection isn't really there. And anybody that ranked Anthony Steen as a 3-star, I don't think they were too far off, because while he had a tremendous amount of success in the college level and did have some success on the NFL level as well, NFL evaluators, they didn't draft him. He went undrafted. And so when you're trying to, a lot of these rankings nowadays, there's a reason there's 32 5-star players, because there's 32 first-round picks. And so recruiting services are trying to project guys, and how they're going to end up playing out in the NFL draft. So I understand it to an extent, but Bear McWhorter, severely underrated player right now. I think he's going to climb, and I think Alabama's in really good shape to land him. And one of the other things I love about him, Mick, is, he's kind of said, wherever I commit to, that's where I'm going to visit. I want to build relationships there. I want to help that school recruit.
Right.
But when I make my commitment on February 28th, you got a guy who's going to be loyal. He's going to be in it for the long haul. He already committed to Arkansas and decided to back off of that. Thought it was a rush decision, or he felt like it was probably a rush decision the first time. I think he's learned from that. He's looking forward, and he wants to be a big part of somebody's recruiting class. And while when this commitment happens, it might be Alabama or Michigan lands 3-star offensive lineman Bear McWhorter, I think that's going to be a much bigger deal than the headlines will indicate.
It's funny too when you see a lot of these guys that are recruits, big recruits for Alabama, and they love Alabama. I mean, obviously, when your name's Bear, I mean, that's going back before Saban. Sadarian Morgan from Benjamin Russell High School, 5-star wide receiver. He's like, hey, when the family got together, we got together to watch Alabama. And I know Auburn's on him pretty good right now, but Alabama's got to go and get these guys. I mean, and I know that part of it's nostalgia and everything else, but you got the facility, you got the coaches, you got the history. You should have the NIL money. And if you can get enough of those guys that love your program and love your school, it's going to help you with, people jumping ship.
He's not an in-state guy, but if Alabama lands him, I would view him as an in-state guy.
Right.
Because he's got that, like he grew up an Alabama fan. He's named after a legendary Alabama head coach. He really wants to, it's hard to say, this guy's going to be super loyal because he just decommitted from an SEC program not too long ago. And so that's going to make people have their reservations. But right. I think he learned from that experience. And he wants to be a guy. He doesn't want to be known as one of these guys who flips and goes a bunch of different places and decommits and commits and does all that. So he's done that once. He was being pursued by some smaller schools at that time. Really last summer, his camp performances where Alabama really jumped on board. And so they were kind of late recruiting him, but he's talked about how good of a job that they've done, kind of laying out a plan for him. It's kind of, making him feel like he was a high priority target, which he absolutely is. And we've seen Alabama's staff right now, they want to add athleticism as much as they possibly can. But they want nastiness up front. They want guys that just want to bully folks. Like you can have all the athleticism in the world, but in the SEC, that nastiness, that physicality is something that's really going to be a tone setter for your offensive identity. And, we talk about Washington's offense under Kalen DeBoer and kind of, in some ways it's viewed as kind of being finesse. That's not what they want to be. There's a reason they won the Joe Moore Award, that offensive line. Yeah. They were athletes. They could do a lot of different things, extremely versatile, but they want to get after your ass and they want to make your ass quit. And Parker Brailsford is he was a 275-pound offensive lineman for Washington, who was a perfect representation of that there. Now he's a 290-pound offensive lineman in the SEC, and he's a perfect representation of that for Alabama now. So just I love this kid. I can't emphasize this enough. Like I've been watching a bunch of these guys, and I love the athleticism that some have. I love the, just the physical attributes with Bear McWhorter. I think he's got some physical attributes that are pretty desirable, but it is his demeanor and his leadership qualities that I think would make a huge difference for the Crimson Tide.
Well, we'll be excited to watch, and maybe when he's doing his commitment, we'll jump on here and do a show and kind of bring him home, because I got a good feeling about Bear coming to Tuscaloosa, and then hopefully they just continue to get out there and recruit and knock down some of these local guys. Like you said, I feel like even though he's from Cartersville, it's like, towards Atlanta, it's right past the line. He's a Bama guy, and he's a guy that is definitely a high riser. And you're right, man. If you get that offensive line that goes out there and just wants to maul the opposition, good things happen for you in the game of football. And that's been an area where we've kind of been let down, I feel like, offensive line since 2020 season. It just feels like every year we're waiting on the offensive line to be good. And it could be other stuff involved too. Mike Johnson always helps us talk about that, break it down, or maybe the running backs aren't doing their job, or maybe Milroe's holding the ball too long. But all that's changing now. It's going to be a much different looking offense. And these are the type of players that I'm sure Coach Cap, who's been recruiting Bear, wants. And he's done a great job. You talk about recruiting. Coach Cap has been killing it on the recruiting front. I mean, I'm sure there was, when they didn't get, the coach that was going to coach him last year, what's the guy's name that went to Washington?
Scott Huff.
Scott Huff, yeah. When Huff went to Washington, it's like, man, we're losing one of our guys. Well, they went out and I think they found the right guy. The Juice Squad, baby, you get out there and the recruiting for the offensive line in last year's class was tremendous. Even when Ty Haywood took the money and ran to Michigan, Bama still did great. And it sounds like he's right there at it again.
He has and it's not just his vision. It's a shared vision with Kalen DeBoer, and it was a shared vision with Nick Sheridan. Now I'm sure Ryan Grubb is a part of that. But they have a vision for what they want in an offensive lineman. And everybody does this at every position. Nick Saban was known for this. Like if you were under 6 foot as a corner, just don't really expect Nick Saban to recruit you, That was kind of one of the things. You need to have length and, all these different traits. With the offensive line, like I said, they want you to be to get as much size on you as possible without sacrificing your athleticism. So they need to see a guy who has a frame to hold more weight, but they want to see a guy who has the athleticism and the functional ability to be able to move, to be able to do all the different things. And that's something with Alabama's offensive line. Like, I love Tyler Booker to death. I think he's going to be a phenomenal NFL offensive lineman. I think he's going to be a day one draft pick. Schematically, what Alabama under Kalen DeBoer wants to do as far as getting its offensive linemen out on the move, on screens, on all these different things, pulling them, pin and pulls, everything, it requires a certain level of athleticism. And Tyler Booker, for being a guy his size, he was pretty damn good at that. But he also wasn't the ideal style of player for that style to be, to where it kind of limited what you could do a little bit. That's what we talk about, and they'll continue to be a little bit limited. Like, as much as I love Caden Proctor, and I think he's got a bright future, he's continuing to get better, and he will be effective in Alabama's offense, make no mistake. I think that, like, that style of player is not the style that they're necessarily targeting nowadays. They want the, a little bit smaller but can hold more weight. They want the athleticism, and they want a nastiness. Everybody knows the offensive line is supposed to be filled with a bunch of bullies. And when you've got that, and you've got guys who, Bear McWhorter, he doesn't want to just go out there and hit somebody. He wants to bury somebody on every play. Go pull up his huddle highlights. Right. It's like 60 straight plays of this dude just burying everybody. And it could be a freaking corner that he gets out in space on. It could be a second level linebacker. It can be a safety. It can be an end. It could be a tackle blocking down. This guy gets after your ass every play. That's something that Coach Cap wants in his offensive lineman. And I think when you talk about the 2025 class and the guys they signed, and you start looking at guys like Bear McWhorter, if Alabama can close on him, add him to this offensive line, and continue to kind of move forward with that style of player in mind, this is going to be a nasty bunch collectively, and it's going to be a lot of fun to watch, I promise.
Yeah, another guy to keep an eye on. We'll talk about him later. Chris Booker from Atlanta, Georgia. And he's another one of those offensive linemen that is listed as 4 or 5 star, depending on what recruiting service. Again, there you go, Coach Cap over there. Alabama had a favorite to bring him in. But everywhere you look, where Coach Cap is, I think that his enthusiasm and his personality draw these players to want to come and be part of what he's doing at Alabama, and I love that. And that to me has been a position coaching wise that Alabama has not really had the right fit. They've had some good coaches, but it just hasn't been the right fit. I feel like he's the right fit.
I will say this, Mick, to wrap this up into a nice little bow. The first time I talked to Coach Cap, that we all as the media talked to Coach Cap, immediately just guys have certain energies about them. Jamarcus Shepard is one of those guys too. And that's what really made me, it was those two guys who probably stood out the most, not the only two, but the most as far as the initial meetings with the media, hearing them talk about their positions, the passion, I was like, I would run through a brick wall for Coach Cap. I'm talking day one, hearing him talk, and the players feel the same way. They love this guy. And so while Scott Huff is a good offensive line coach, and I think he would have been an upgrade? It is very, very possible that overall he would have been an upgrade. That is not necessarily a reflection at all about how I feel about Coach Cap, because I think Coach Cap can and will be one of the better offensive line coaches in college football too. He's kind of what he was working with. It was a clash between, you've got some talent, but you have this vision for what you're going to be asking your offensive line to do. Everybody on offense was dealing with it to an extent. They were dealing with it on defense. But what you're slowly seeing over time is the vision meshing with what they actually have available in that room. And I think Coach Cap is going to benefit as much as anybody from that, kind of collision.
And I should say with Booker, look for him to be a 4-star really soon. One of those guys that Alabama's got on the radar. But you see a lot of these guys, like I said, and you tied it up. Coach Cap, Alabama, they don't have to necessarily look on a piece of paper and say, hey, this is the guy we're supposed to recruit. These guys are also good at the scouting element of this. And I'll give Lane Kiffin a lot of credit for this when he was at Alabama, to be able to go and see, hey, these are the guys that match what I want. and then get them to come over and play for Alabama. I feel like Coach Cap kind of has that same mentality. Like, hey, it's not always about what a recruiting service or what we say about somebody. It's what they look and see on a video, like with Bear, like with Booker, where you're like, hey, these are the kind of guys that we feel like are going to be able to come here and play, and we feel like their mentality matches our what we want our mentality to be. Then you mix them with some 5-star guys, and you might have something.
Exactly, and considering when they got Geno Vandermark last year, considering what everybody thought about that addition when Alabama got him. He had kind of barely started for Michigan State, had about a handful of starts, was kind of a 3-star coming out of high school, wasn't overly pursued by anybody. Is he exactly what we're talking about as far as the nastiness and all of those things? No. But what I will say is from a talent evaluation standpoint, Alabama needed somebody who could come in and provide depth in multiple spots on the interior of their offensive line, someone who fit the scheme and could be a serviceable player if they needed him to. Just so happened, Jaden Roberts really struggled to stay healthy this year. Alabama needed Geno Vandermark to be a serviceable player, and they got exactly out of him what they were looking for. And so when we talk about, looking for this particular style of offensive lineman, you're not always going to get that exact combination.
Yeah.
But it's also about talent evaluation. And when you see a guy be brought in for a specific purpose and he fills that purpose the way that Geno Vandermark did, especially at that, I mean, the offensive line, the transfer portal, it's hard to peg guys, especially in that late window. So the fact they went out and got a guy like Geno Vandermark, I think that says a lot about the evaluation style or process of this staff. And I think it bodes well for the offensive line moving forward.
Yeah, we'll be keeping an eye on that. And exciting time, man. And what's going to happen is one going to pop, then another one's going to pop, and then another one's going to pop, and all of a sudden you're going to have a halfway full class that'll be there. So but right now you got one guy. You're like, man, we got one guy. I mean, I don't remember us having one guy, but it's happened before. And then all of a sudden, Saban was always such a great finisher. You'd be like, all right, well, 2 guys, 3 guys. Oh, we just got 4 5-stars. Like right at the end.
I'm telling you, it's kind of how Alabama is typically operating. This was this way under Nick Saban for the most part as well. It's like I couldn't even tell you. Is it May? Yeah, probably. In April, late April, you might start seeing some guys trickle in. But like May, June, and July, it's like they hammer this process. And then by the time that the end of July rolls around, when fall camp gets ready to get underway, Alabama, for the most part, kind of has their class locked up. Assuming that they keep guys, and there's still some guys that they're going after that haven't committed. You'll still get early signing period, day of commitments. But for the most part, it's pretty collectively done. But before that, very few commitments. And then after that, very few commitments. So that I would expect that to continue. I wouldn't be concerned with the number of guys in this class right now. They're in really good shape with a lot of really good players, and I think they're going to close on a lot of them.
Guys, we're brought to you by mybookie.ag. Use the promo code next round to double your initial deposit. Man, take advantage of that next round code at mybookie.ag. The NBA, college basketball, March Madness is almost here, which is crazy to think, right? But all that's coming up. A lot of big basketball games Bama's playing in. Mybookie.ag. And again, that promo code for your initial deposit, they'll double it with that promo code next round. All right, let's talk a little basketball. Bama didn't win on Saturday. The fans did, though, man. I got to tell the fans this. Coleman Coliseum's never been my favorite, but that was a different Coleman Coliseum that I saw. They didn't lose because the fans didn't show up. I mean, it was electric. I didn't know that that building could have that type of vibe. To me, though, it came down to one thing. They just didn't make enough shots. They just didn't make enough threes, right? And when I watched Florida beat Auburn like a week ago, they hit a lot of shots, not just the easy ones, but the difficult shots. Auburn made the difficult shots against Alabama, got out to a 9-0 run. And I feel like this is a good litmus test for this basketball team because they're not quite there yet. But Auburn's a really good team. It was their day. But I don't feel like Alabama's out of anything. I think that it's one of those games to me, Clint, where you do a little bit better protecting the ball. You make the big shots when somebody's got to step up. Normally it's Sears. and make those big shots when they're there. And I think things are going to be all right for this team. But it was disappointing.
It was disappointing. It was one of those really frustrating games to watch from a fan's perspective, because there for a while it was like they kept getting within 2 points, and it's like they could not, for whatever reason, get over that hump and take the lead. And then it became there for a while. It's like they got down by 15 points at the start of the second half, and they're fighting and clawing and trying to get back in it. And it's like they couldn't quite get it to single digits. It's like if you can get it to single digits, you feel like you got a chance when there's still a lot of time on the clock. And they kept, it'd be like I think they got it to 10 once or twice. It was like 11 once, where it's like they had an opportunity, shot a 2, down 11. It's like if they hit this, they'll go to 9 points. And we might see something get rolling here. And they just, for the longest, they just couldn't do it. And I finally tweeted that out. And the second I did, they actually cut it to single digits. And then from there, it was kind of, they closed the gap. Alabama didn't start or finish either half very well. And by very well, I mean they didn't play well at all. I mean, getting down 9-0 to start, the way they finished the first half, as far as, it was a dead even match. And then, they go on, Auburn goes on a run and creates the 9-point lead. And then to start the second half, they get it all the way up to 15. And then the way that it finished, after you were able to fight and claw and scratch and get back in it, and tie the game up, it's like from that point forward, Auburn just kind of, I'll give Auburn a lot of credit, a lot of counter punches. I mean, every time Alabama kind of did something big and would close the gap, and really just that entire place was completely rocking. And it's like Bama's got every ounce of momentum that you could possibly have in this game. Auburn would immediately strike with something. And, as far as,
they answered.
They answered, didn't they, Mick? I mean, it was, and it wasn't just the 3-point line
every time.
Like a lot of people point to live and die by the 3. That didn't make sense with this Alabama team. They were forced off the 3-point line. Auburn did a nice job of that. They weren't making layups. They weren't making free throws. They weren't moving the ball well enough. Everybody looks to 3-pointers, and obviously you can mask a lot of those issues when you are hitting your shots, your deep shots, but there was just a lot wrong. Alabama did limit the turnovers, and that was nice to see. But, there's a lot of ways to lose a basketball game, and I think Alabama showed that.
Yeah, Sears has to have a better day, man. 4 of 17 shooting, 2 of 11 from 3. You got to make those. I mean, he still ended up with 18 points, but this team's built around Sears, right? And when they made the run last year in the tournament, he didn't have games like that. I mean, he's making all these shots, so he's got to kind of get in his groove, or they need to take advantage of Mo Diabate and Clifford Amore down low, because I felt like that Alabama had some advantages down there, and they just kept missing so many shots.
Aiden Sherrill should have played more. I don't know why he didn't. I think, LeBaron should have played more.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't even know how many minutes he ended up playing, but it feels like right now, just the current lineup that they have just isn't working. I think Sears needs to be playing less point, needs to be more so playing the 2. Jaron Stevenson, he's showing his flashes, but man, just I feel like this year he's kind of, the consistency's just been all over the place for this guy. And he's still young. I mean, he reclassified, so I mean, he technically should be a true freshman right now. But I don't know, Mick. It just it was not the ideal way for that game to play out. It was not because of the crowd at all. It was exactly the environment you would want. But Alabama gets another shot at them. And you got to go to the jungle. And it's going to be a tough environment too. But Alabama's capable.
Well, they played better on the road. I mean, they shot 19% from 3, 5 of 26. No one had more than 1 except Sears, but he was 2 of 11. I agree with you on LeBaron. He played 23 minutes and he looked really good, man. I mean, like he just has that superstar look to him. It's tough when you have a roster with so much talent. And what's the other part is when you take Sears out of the game, everybody's like, why isn't Sears in there? But sometimes they play better without him, and he didn't have a good game on Saturday.
Well, it's just the block shots, the rim. Just, I feel like there was a lot of kick out opportunities that they didn't take advantage of when they probably should have. They needed better looks from outside. They weren't getting many good looks. And when those opportunities were seemingly presenting themselves, I don't feel like Alabama was doing a good job, especially Mark Sears of picking those spots well. And like I said, not enough ball movement. And I think that there's a spacing issue when you've got Sears, playing the one. I don't know. It's an interesting. It's been an interesting season because they found a way to overcome some of these issues in pretty much all of most of these games. But when you start talking about teams like Auburn and how are you going to get over the hump, you gotta make you can't allow them to counterpunch like they did, and you've got to figure out your lineup and how you're going to approach the playing time for certain guys.
Get on covercrimson.com. We talk about basketball on there too, as Stacy Blackwood had posted a question, and I thought it was interesting and worth bringing up on our show kind of in closing today. But basically, if we downplayed the loss of Latrell Wrightsell, and I could see that being a yes. Games like this seemed like he had a lot of big games in those situations.
Yeah, I mean, he was kind of a spot shooter, right? I mean, like the fact that they've kind of struggled as far as and this is the part that didn't make sense to me as far as everybody say Alabama lives by the three and dies by the three. Like
right.
They're not hitting 3-point shots at a very high percentage right now. I think they're pretty average in that category. And Latrell Wrightsell would have helped in that area. I think just the role that he would have played on this team would have created more spacing in certain situations. It was we all just looked at the depth of this squad. We looked at all the different places that they could score. I don't think anybody saw Mark Sears kind of having the problems that he's had. I think that's a big reason why people thought, okay, if you're still getting the same Mark Sears that you've always gotten, you've got all this other talent. But I mean, it wasn't just Latrell Wrightsell. It was Darian Reed has been out. I mean, he finally played this game, but that's kind of been a loss. Like they've dealt with some issues. They're not close to 100%, but they've still got way more than enough talent to do everything that they want to do. They've just got to tweak some things and get it figured out.
Great to see all you guys in the comments section. We'll do it again tomorrow, right here on covercrimson.com. And make sure you check out covercrimson.com. And I meant the Cover Crimson YouTube channel. Like, subscribe, thumbs up. But every day at noon, man, we're going to be here. That's our new time slot, and we're enjoying it. Lunch with Clint is what I like to call it. Lunch with Clint.
Lunch with Lamb?
Yeah. Wait, how do you like your lamb? Do you like your lamb with I personally go with like a mint jelly.
I don't know, Mick. I got to be honest with you, brother. I've never had lamb. I feel
probably.
Yeah, it just feels a little weird, man. I don't know. I feel like I'm eating a relative.
Yeah, lamb for lamb. All right, brother. Anything else you want to get into today?
No, this has been great. A little recruiting, a little basketball, and I appreciate anybody's input, especially on basketball. Like I don't claim to know everything. I mean, far from it. But I've been trying to learn. It's been fun. I think there's a lot of good people out there that know this sport. They know the Alabama basketball program, and they do a great job of sharing information and really kind of helping people like me grow. And so, like you said, if you haven't already, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Like we're trying to get this thing before before fall camp is over, before season opener. We want to at least be sitting at 7,500 subscribers, bare minimum.
Ooh,
that's where we're starting. We're about probably about 1,100 away right now. We appreciate everybody's support. It's been incredible. But if you just watch these videos, if you come across them and you haven't subscribed, that helps us tremendously. We really want to hit that goal, and we appreciate everybody who already has and will.
All right, man. Well, roll tide, everybody. Bama basketball plays at Missouri on Wednesday, and it'll be a good chance for them to rebound, and we'll talk to you guys tomorrow right here on Cover.